Another important thing that we all need to be aware of is the concept of role-based access within an application like Essentials. So there are three terms that we all need to be familiar with: user, role, and permissions. User is the person who is using the Essentials. In this case, me, Lionel, is the user who will be logging into the application Essentials. And I will be using an account called trainer. So that is the user account. So my business title in my organization will be something different. I will be holding a title of training manager. But when I logged into the Essentials application, I might have different roles assigned to me. It can be an administrator, it can be a project manager, or anything for that matter. So what role that I play within Essentials has no connection, or there is no relation between the role that I would be playing within the application versus the business title that I'm holding in my organization. So these two are two different things. Now, let me talk about the concept of permissions. Yes, we have these different roles assigned to our user accounts within Essentials. What does this role signify? Each role signifies the permissions that are provided to that user to perform certain actions. So each role has a set of permissions assigned to them. So a project manager role will have permissions to create projects, create budget and forecasts. An administrator role will have permissions to create user accounts, create custom forms within our Essentials. So those are the permissions that are defined for these different roles. And when a user account is assigned these roles, those user accounts can perform these different actions based on the permissions assigned to those rules. Let's say there are two user accounts. One is Kiara Stalin and the one is John Felix. They are holding two different titles in their organization. Kiara is a project manager in the organization. John Felix is a quality engineer in the organization. But the system in Essentials, they are assigned a set of roles. Kiara is assigned project manager and administrator role, whereas John Felix is assigned a quality engineer role. Based on the role, they have a set of permissions defined. Permission set A is defined for Kiara. Permission set B is defined for John Felix. So based on the permissions, they can view certain forms, certain modules, and they can perform certain actions. Like you're seeing in the screenshot, Kiara, with that set of permissions, they can view all the four modules, whereas John Felix, who has a set of permissions, can only view our home and projects. That's what I highlighted sometime back when we started the session. So this is how you can control the permissions and the viewability of the users within Essentials based on the roles and permissions that we define as administrators. Okay. Now you might wonder, how do we set it up? So in the administration module, we have the ability to create roles. Having said that, we have as Essentials, we have predefined, pre-configured roles, pre-configured permissions for each of those roles. On top of it, if you want to configure anything new, to modify anything existing, you have the ability to create them, configure permissions for those roles. And then when we create user accounts, these roles can be assigned to those user accounts. Once your user accounts are created, as roles are assigned to those user accounts, when projects are created and contracts are created, when these users are explicitly invited to those projects and contracts, they will be able to perform the required action in those projects and contracts based on the roles and permissions assigned to those user accounts. So that's a high level overview of how role configuration process is defined within Essentials. Okay. Beyond this, there is one other concept that I want to introduce you to before I talk about setting up a project in itself. That is called as business unit. Role permission is important. Configuration of permissions for those roles are important. Assigning the roles are important. Inviting the users to the projects are important. But you also need to know, can a user be invited to all the projects, or are there restrictions there as well? That's where the concept of business unit comes into picture. For any organization, you would have different business units based on the categorization of how the business is defined. So they are independent divisions of an organization. They have their own resources. They can be either in one level or it can be hierarchical. And every user created in the system in Essentials must have at least one business unit assigned to them. That means if I am logging into the system Essentials, I have at least one business unit assigned to me, so that when a project gets created, the project will also have one business unit assigned. A user a user account can have any number of business units assigned so that that user can perform actions in any different projects as well. But for a project to get created, project cannot be assigned multiple business units because in reality, when a project is created, it will be specific to a business unit. So Essentials defines the controls to assign one business unit per project, one business unit per contract. Whereas a user account that is created within Essentials can be assigned multiple business units. So it gives the flexibility for the user to work on different projects and different contracts. So like I mentioned, business units are associated to both users and projects. A user, when they are created in user management, business unit is associated to them. When a project is created in the projects list page, a business unit is associated to them. A user with access to a parent business unit can be invited to projects belonging to the child business units. The vice versa is not possible, that I just explained in the example. Now let me quickly throw you a question. Just read this scenario. So B1 is the main business unit and B1.1 is a sub business unit. So that means B1 is a parent business unit, B1.1 is a child business unit under it. Given below are combinations of business units of projects and users. For which combinations will the user be able to have access to the project? So in this case, users BU is B1, projects BU is B1. Will this user be able to be invited to this project? Both business units are same. So this users who are part of the B1 will be able to get invited to projects that are part of B1. Okay. Now let's talk about the second option, which is B1.1. So this user is part of a child business unit, whereas a project is part of a parent business unit. So in this case, the user cannot be invited to this project because the project is part of a business unit that the user is not part of, because the user is a child business unit associated. So this option cannot happen. Second option cannot happen. Let's think about the third one. The user is part of B1. Project is part of a child BU. So in this case, can this user be invited to this project? Absolutely. Let's say there is a project which is part of B1.2. If this B1.2 is part of B1, then this user can be invited to both projects, B1.1 and B1.2. The user is eligible to be invited to these both projects because these two are part of the child business units, which are part of the parent business unit, B1, which the user is invited to. Now, the fourth option. So this is possible. The fourth option is B1.1, B1.1. Again, it's a direct association. These two users, this user can be invited to the project because both are associated to the child business unit. So that is why the second option is the only option that cannot happen, because in the previous slide, like we saw, users accessing parent BUs can be invited to projects belonging to child BUs. The vice versa is not possible. Because of that reason, the second option is not feasible. Okay. Now, this demonstration, I kind of hinted it already. Let me just go back to the system and tell you where the business units form is. Like I mentioned, administrators, when they log into the administration module, when they expand the functional configurations, there is a form called business units. When they click that, they land on the business units list page where they have already pre-configured business units available. If they want to create, if administrators want to create newer business units, they have the ability to do so by clicking new, enter the name of the business unit, specify whether the BU is a root BU or a child BU. If they say child BU, then they need to specify under which parent BU do I want to create this child BU as. So if I say public services, then this BU will be part of the public services parent business unit. I will provide a description and I will mark it as is active. If this is cleared, that means this business unit will not be available for any user to get associated to, any project to get associated to. But keep in mind, if you are trying to edit an existing business unit and try to mark it as inactive, you need to ensure that no user is associated to that BU, no project is associated to that BU. If any association is existing, that marking that as inactive will not be successful. So that is one thing I wanted to highlight. So that is business units. The next concept that I wanted to touch about is the point of user management. So user management, it enables you to create and manage security roles, user accounts, and permissions. First, security roles need to be defined. And for each role, permissions need to be configured. Once this is set by the administrators, every time a new user is created, roles can be assigned to those users. Once the users are created, that doesn't mean that they can access every project that is available in the system. They need to be invited to those projects and contracts as well with the required roles. Now you might wonder who creates it, where do we create it? Like I said, under administration, when you expand the user management folder, you will have these various functionalities which will help them create all these setups. And when a user gets created, they will be assigned these roles. I will quickly tell you how this is done, but I'm not going to explain further because this is specific for administrators. But for any user, they need to know how these things are configured. On that basis, I will quickly walk you through that. So like I mentioned, under administrator, we have a folder called user management. And under this, we have a form called security roles. Under security roles, like I said, these roles are pre-configured. All of these roles are pre-configured. If the organization decides or the company, or the customer decides to change it, they can either as in rename the role or create a new role. So in this case, you can only do two things here. Just provide the role and description. That is one thing you can do. So just you are defining the role. The other option that you can do is manage users. So if you are, let's say there is a role called consultant, which says external planning and design consult professionals. So you want to assign this role to a bunch of existing users who are already created. You can come here as an administrator, select the record, go to manage users. These are the available users. These are the users who are already assigned this role. If you want to add more users to it, all they have to do is select the role and click the button here. It will get assigned. Once they do it, they have to save the record. That means those users are now assigned the consultant role. But we have still not assigned any permissions to these roles, correct? How would you do that is in the permissions form. Again, these are administrator specific, but I'll tell you how it works. So in this role section, if I search for senior project manager, this particular role, all the forms and functionalities that are available within the projects module and administration module and everywhere are listed here. Against each of these functionalities, the respective role permissions, create permission, edit permission are selected by administrators. Based on this, the senior project manager is able to either create a document, delete a document. So in this case, as I scroll down, you would notice that the, let me go ahead and explain something which has a concrete example to be highlighted. Yes. In this case, as a senior project manager, they are able to create daily progress reports as part of progress tracking. So they can create a record, edit a record, view a record, delete a record, but this particular role doesn't have any permission to do with item postings. So item postings are done by a specific set of roles as per essentials configuration. If the administration, the company decides that senior PMs will also need to be able to at least edit an existing item posting record and perform an audit log for the same. If they have to do that, they will come here and select this. But keep in mind, anytime an administrator makes any changes to the permission, it will have an impact on all the existing users who have these roles assigned to them. So this particular form needs to be handled very carefully, and it has to be done before the functional use of the application kickstarts. This should be done as part of the configuration and implementation. Once it is done is when the actual functional modules will start kicking in. So this way, you can create roles and permissions. Once the permission, this is form level and you have reports within that. The reports also can be assigned. For example, each functionality will have these reports. They can select the report and that way that they will be able to access that report. You can do it by forms. You can do it by roles as well. I showed you role specific. In this case, I'm going to show you by form. You don't want to show by form as roles. In this case, I want to search budget estimate. And under budget estimates, I want to see if I want to give any specific additional roles to any specific security role. You can do that here. Once all of this is done, right, then you have your permissions configured. So we did create our security roles. We assign permissions to them. Based on the permissions assigned to these roles, anytime a user is created using user accounts, they will be assigned these roles. For example, I'm going to search for the user account called Lionel. That is my name. So I go ahead and create this record and show you. So when a user account is created by an administrator, they would provide the username, which is unique, which should be unique. Email ID should be unique. First name can be anything, but these are mandatory fields. They would provide type, internal or external. An account expiry date would be provided. All of these are provided. Keep in mind, there are two important things any user account should have: business unit, available rules, and assigned rules. So in this case, this particular user account has almost all of the business units assigned, except for some of them. So anytime a project gets created, which has any one of these business units assigned to that project, this user is eligible to be invited to that project. So when the project manager of that project decides Lionel needs to be invited to this project so that that person can start taking actions in that project, they will be able to invite me because I have business units that that project has the same. So that way I will be able to be invited to that project. So that is business unit. Now roles. This is an important thing. Any user that gets created, they need to be assigned the appropriate roles. In this case, this particular user account is assigned only project manager role. If the administrator wants to provide any other role, project coordinator, program manager to this role, they will be able to perform functionalities within the system based on the permissions assigned to all of these roles, right? So the question that you asked, if I want another user to perform both the roles, you assign both the roles to them, they will be able to do both. So that's the simple answer. This is important for you to be aware of because you log into a system, you're seeing certain forms, you're able to see certain controls. You need to know how are they coming, why are they coming. This is exactly how and why it is coming. Your user account has certain roles assigned. Those roles have some permissions configured, and your user account is also invited to certain projects based on which you are able to access the project and view the records or create records within that project as well.